The word papyrus, papyrus, refers to a thick paper-like material made from the pith of the papyrus plant, Cyperus papyrus. Papyrus can also refer to a document written on sheets of papyrus joined together side by side and rolled up into a scroll, an early form of a book. The plural for such documents is papyri. Papyrus is first known to have been used in ancient Egypt, as the Cyperus papyrus plant was a wetland sedge that was once abundant in the sud of southern Sudan along with the Nile Delta of Egypt. Papyrus was also used throughout the Mediterranean region and in Kingdom of Kush. The ancient Egyptians used papyrus as a writing material, as well as employing it commonly in the construction of other artifacts such as reed boats, mats, ropes, sandals, and baskets. History. Papyrus was first manufactured in Egypt and southern Sudan as far back as the 4th millennium BCE. The earliest archaeological evidence of papyrus was excavated in 2012 and 2013 at Wadi al-Jarf, an ancient Egyptian harbour located on the Red Sea coast. These documents date from c. 2560–2550 BCE. The papyrus rolls describe the last years of building the Great Pyramid of Giza. In the 1st centuries BCE and CE, papyrus scrolls gained a rival as a writing surface in the form of parchment, which was prepared from animal skins. Sheets of parchment were folded to form quires from which book-form codices were fashioned. Codices were an improvement on the papyrus scroll, as the papyrus was not pliable enough to fold without cracking and a long roll, or scroll, was required to create large volume texts. Papyrus had the advantage of being relatively cheap and easy to produce, but it was fragile and susceptible to both moisture and excessive dryness. Unless the papyrus was of perfect quality, the writing surface was irregular, and the range of media that could be used was also limited. Papyrus was replaced in Europe by the cheaper, locally produced products parchment and vellum, of significantly higher durability in moist climates. Though Henry Perren's connection of its disappearance with the Muslim conquest of Egypt is contested, its last appearance in the Merovingian chancellery is with a document of 692, though it was known in Gaul until the middle of the following century. The latest certain dates for the use of papyrus are 1057 for a papal decree, under Pope Victor II, and 1087 for an Arabic document. Its use in Egypt continued until it was replaced by more inexpensive paper introduced by Arabs. By the 12th century, parchment and paper were in use in the Byzantine Empire, but papyrus was still an option. Papyrus was made in several qualities and prices. These are listed, with minor differences, both by Pliny and Isidore of Seville. Until the middle of the 19th century, only some isolated documents written on papyrus were known. They did not contain literary works. The first discovery of papyri rolls in modern days was made at Herculaneum in 1752. Before that date, the only papyri known were a few surviving from medieval times. Etymology. The English word papyrus derives, via Latin, from Greek pi alpha pi epsilon rho omicron sigma, a loanword of unknown origin. Greek has a second word for it, beta epsilon beta lambda omicron sigma. The Greek writer Theophrastus, who flourished during the 4th century BC, uses papyrus when referring to the plant used as a foodstuff and bublos for the same plant when used for non-food products, such as cordage, basketry, or writing surfaces. The more specific term beta iota beta lambda omicron sigma biblos, which finds its way into English in such words as bibliography, bibliophile, and Bible, refers to the inner bark of the papyrus plant. Papyrus is also the etymon of paper, a similar substance. In the Egyptian language, papyrus was called wadj, tufi, or djet. Documents written on papyrus. The word for the material papyrus is also used to designate documents written on sheets of it, often rolled up into scrolls. The plural for such documents is papyri. Historical papyri are given identifying names, generally the name of the discoverer, first owner or institution where they are kept, and numbered, such as Papyrus Harrisii. Often an abbreviated form is used, such as Pharisii. These documents provide important information on ancient writings. They give us the only extant copy of Menander, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Egyptian treatises on medicine and on surgery, Egyptian mathematical treatises, and Egyptian folk tales. When, in the 18th century, a library of ancient papyri was found in Herculaneum, ripples of expectation spread among the learned men of the time. However, since these papyri were badly charred, their unscrolling and deciphering is still going on today. Manufacture and use. Papyrus is made from the stem of the papyrus plant, Cyperus papyrus. The outer rind is first removed, and the sticky fibrous inner pith is cut lengthwise into thin strips of about 40 centimeters long. The strips are then placed side by side on a hard surface with their edges slightly overlapping, and then another layer of strips is laid on top at a right angle. The strips may have been soaked in water long enough for decomposition to begin, perhaps increasing adhesion, but this is not certain. The two layers possibly were glued together. While still moist, the two layers are hammered together, mashing the layers into a single sheet. The sheet is then dried under pressure. After drying, the sheet is polished with some rounded object, possibly a stone or seashell or round hardwood. Sheets could be cut to fit the obligatory size or glued together to create a longer roll. A wooden stick would be attached to the last sheet in a roll, making it easier to handle. To form the long strip scrolls required, a number of such sheets were united, placed so all the horizontal fibers parallel with the roll's length were on one side and all the vertical fibers on the other. Normally, texts were first written on the recto, the lines following the fibers, parallel to the long edges of the scroll. Secondarily, papyrus was often reused, writing across the fibers on the verso. Pliny the Elder describes the methods of preparing papyrus in his Naturalis Historia. In a dry climate, like that of Egypt, papyrus is stable, formed as it is of highly rot-resistant cellulose, but storage in humid conditions can result in molds attacking and destroying the material. Library papyrus rolls were stored in wooden boxes and chests made in the form of statues. Papyrus scrolls were organized according to subject or author, and identified with clay labels that specified their contents without having to unroll the scroll. In European conditions, papyrus seems to have lasted only a matter of decades. A 200-year-old papyrus was considered extraordinary. Imported papyrus, once commonplace in Greece and Italy, has since deteriorated beyond repair. But papyrus is still being found in Egypt. Extraordinary examples include the Elephantine papyri and the famous finds at Oxyrhynchus and Nag Hammadi. The villa of the papyri at Herculaneum, containing the library of Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus, Julius Caesar's father-in-law, was preserved by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, but has only been partially excavated. Sporadic attempts to revive the manufacture of papyrus have been made since the mid-18th century. Scottish explorer James Bruce experimented in the late 18th century with papyrus plants from the Sudan, for papyrus had become extinct in Egypt. Also in the 18th century, Sicilian Saverio Landolina manufactured papyrus at Syracuse, where papyrus plants had continued to grow in the wild. During the 1920s, when Egyptologist Batis Kamgun lived in Mardi, outside Cairo, he experimented with the manufacture of papyrus. Growing the plant in his garden, he beat the sliced papyrus stalks between two layers of linen, and produced successful examples of papyrus, one of which was exhibited in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The modern technique of papyrus production used in Egypt for the tourist trade was developed in 1962 by the Egyptian engineer Hassan Ragab using plants that had been reintroduced into Egypt in 1872 from France. Both Sicily and Egypt have centers of limited papyrus production. Papyrus is still used by communities living in the vicinity of swamps, to the extent that rural householders derive up to 75% of their income from swamp goods. Particularly in East and Central Africa, people harvest papyrus, which is used to manufacture items that are sold or used locally. Examples include baskets, hats, fish traps, trays or winnowing mats and floor mats. Papyrus is also used to make roofs, ceilings, rope and fences. Although alternatives, such as eucalyptus, are increasingly available, papyrus is still used as fuel. Collections of papyri. Amherst Papyri. This is a collection of William Tyson Amherst, 1st Baron Amherst of Hackney. It includes biblical manuscripts, early church fragments, and classical documents from the Ptolemaic, Roman, and Byzantine eras. The collection was edited by Bernard Grenfell and Arthur Hunt in 1900–1901. It is housed at the Pierpont Morgan Library. Archduke Rainer Papyri. One of the world's largest collection of papyri in the Austrian National Library. Berlin Papyri. Housed in the Egyptian Museum and Papyrus Collection. Bodmer Papyri. This collection was purchased by Martin Bodmer in 1955–1956. Currently it is housed in the Bibliotheca Bodmeriana in Cologne. It includes Greek and Coptic documents, classical texts, biblical books, and writing of the early churches. Brooklyn Papyrus. This papyrus focuses mainly on snake bites and its remedies. It speaks of remedial methods for poisons obtained from snakes, scorpions, and tarantulas. The Brooklyn Papyrus currently resides in the Brooklyn Museum. Chester Beatty Papyri. Collection of 11 codices acquired by Alfred Chester Beatty in 1930, 1931, and 1935. It is housed at the Chester Beatty Library. The collection was edited by Frederick G. Kenyon. Colt Papyri. It is housed at the Pierpont Morgan Library. The Herculaneum Papyri. These papyri were found in Herculaneum in the 18th century, carbonized by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. After some tinkering, a method was found to unroll and to read them. Most of them are housed at the Naples National Archaeological Museum. The Houghton's Papyri. The collection at Houghton Library, Harvard University was acquired between 1901 and 1909 thanks to a donation from the Egypt Exploration Fund. Site Oracle Papyrus. This papyrus located at the Brooklyn Museum records the petition of a man named Pemu on behalf of his father, Hazeza, to ask their god for permission to change temples. Martin Scoyen Collection. Biblical manuscripts in Greek and Coptic, Dead Sea Scrolls, classical documents. Michigan Papyrus Collection. This collection contains above 10,000 papyri fragments. It is housed at the University of Michigan. Oxyrhynchus Papyri. These numerous papyri fragments were discovered by Grenfell and Hunt in and around Oxyrhynchus. The publication of these papyri is still in progress. A large part of the Oxyrhynchus papyri are housed at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, others in the British Museum in London, in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and many other places. Princeton Papyri. It is housed at the Princeton University. Rylands Papyri. This collection contains above 700 papyri, with 31 ostraca and 54 codices. It is housed at the John Rylands University Library. Tebtunis Papyri. Housed by the Bancroft Library at the University of California, Berkeley. This is a collection of more than 30,000 fragments dating from the 3rd century BCE through the 3rd century CE. Found in the winter 1899–1900 at the site of ancient Tebtunis, Egypt, by an expedition team led by the British papyrologists Bernard P. Grenfell and Arthur S. Hunt. Washington University Papyri collection includes 445 manuscript fragments, dating from the 1st century BC to the 8th century AD, housed at the Washington University Libraries. Yale Papyrus collection numbers over 6,000 inventoried items and is catalogued, digitally scanned, and accessible online for close study. It is housed at the Beinecker Library, BGU. Berliner Griechische Urkunden, a publishing project ongoing since 1895.